Hello and welcome to For Future Generations. I am Jeffrey, and I am joined, as always, by my friend Sean. Thank you for coming along. We have some interesting topics today. Going to talk about Aristotelianism and conscription. But before we get too far into it, Sean, you had some uh, ideas about the last show that you wanted to bring up.
Yeah, people send me messages, and the one that got brought up a lot is well, first of all, everyone loved the episode. I didn't get any negative comments. Some people said like, "Well, I'm not convinced, but I thought it was really interesting," and that kind of thing. But
Yeah,
the
I
one
find
thing that,
myself in that camp.
yeah, the one that I kept getting was that they would like to see Samuel Johnson debate somebody on the
Hmm.
topic. So if there's anybody out there who would like to debate this topic, let us know.
Hmm. Stand up and fight for your democracy.
Yeah.
All right.
So yeah, that's the challenge out there. I'm sure Samuel would
Okay.
do it if he.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure. If somebody wants to debate him, it's only going to bring more eyes to the discussion. And of
Yeah.
course, Samuel wants that because he wants as many as many people as possible uh, to read his book, his upcoming book, which we're all looking forward to. But also just people who have a conviction about a certain belief want to see that want to see people talking about and debating that topic publicly. So looking forward to that. Any other thoughts about last week's show, or just
That was
throw it
it.
out there?
Just wanted
If
to.
you want to debate, uh, we'd be more than happy to moderate.
Yeah.
If some big names like if James White wants to
Mm,
debate the efficacy of democracy, I know that's
democracy.
not
Yeah.
his wheelhouse, but we'd be more than happy
Why
to
not?
sit in on that. All
All right.
right. Well, Sean, go ahead and take it away. We'll go with your topic first.
All right. I'm gonna be sharing some comments by a gentleman named David Mamet.
And who is David Mamet, real quick before we get into it?
Is a screenwriter. Uh,
Okay.
he's got some success. I'm immediately forgetting his credentials, but he's enough of a success to where people care what he has to say.
Okay. All right. Well,
I'm
let's see what he has to say.
gonna see. Yeah, I'm gonna play this, and then I will explain it afterwards.
All right.
The palatable truth is there's no such thing as character. Just doesn't exist. Where is it? Where is it? Here, go through the thing. I'm going to shake out. All there is the things that people say. Why do they say them? In order to get something from each other.
That was David Mamet.
All right, so
They say things in order to get things from each other.
yeah, so first of all, you have to understand that what he's talking about is um, in the context of writing a character,
Hmm.
right? So he's not necessarily talking about like people and like
Yeah,
why,
there's no such thing as character among people.
right?
Hmm.
He's saying that there's no such thing as character in a script or in
Hmm.
a novel. There's no such thing as that. And what he is pushing against is people that will give the writing advice of um, like character building, and they'll
Hmm.
say, they'll write like these character, um, like a page. They'll have like a one page of like, oh, this guy believes in this, or he does this, or whatever. But that doesn't actually exist on the page.
Right.
And so that's his controversial opinion. So, and it makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, there's no such thing in like a movie or a book where it just says um I mean, I guess the only example I could think of, and it's one that people joke about anyways, is in the Bible where it says that Moses was the most humble man,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like,
And who exactly is writing this?
yeah. So that's kind of the question. Oh, got my buddy on. Um,
Oh, is he popping in the live chat? Let me pop
yeah.
over there. All right, cool.
And so there's that, but like it's so jarring that we take note, right?
hmm
Like this idea that it just stops and says, "Hey, he was really humble," or
Yeah, it
"I
it
was
kind
really
of breaks the fourth wall,
yeah,
to
yeah."
use a drama expression, you know.
So where that comes into play, as far as Aristotle goes, is that essentially what this guy's advocating for is virtue ethics.
hmm
And the reason I say that is because he's saying that
All right.
you're
Before
not.
we proceed too far, for the people haven't uh, who aren't versed in the subject, what is the 10-second on virtue ethics? What is that?
Okay, I have some. This is a pretty good little summary from Wikipedia.
Okay.
Um, it says Aristotle's ethics is said to be teleological in that it is based on an investigation into the telos or end of a human. In Aristotle's philosophy, the telos of a thing can hardly be separated from the perfection of that thing, and the
hmm
final cause of anything becomes identical with the good of that thing, so that the end and the good become synonymous terms. Taking this approach, Aristotle proposes that the highest good for humans is eudaimonia, a Greek word often translated as flourishing or sometimes happiness. Aristotle
hmm
argues that eudaimonia is a way of taking action that is appropriate to the human at its most excellent or virtuous. Eudaimonia is the most complete aim that people can have because they choose it for its own sake. An excellent human is one who is good at living life, who does so well and beautifully. Aristotle says such a person would also be a serious human being. He also asserts that virtue for a human must involve reason in thought and speech, as this is a task of human living. Uh, the one thing reading that really stood out to me that I want to bring up is where it talks about an excellent human is one who is good at living life.
hmm
And there's a lot of guys online that will say things about like what a human should be and what a man should be or whatever. But then you look at what their life actually is,
Yeah.
and it's like, come on, man! Like
hmm
you don't have a wife, you don't have kids. Like I understand some guys are young, they haven't gotten to that point yet, and that's that's
That's
great. But even
understandable.
those even those guys are saying, I would like to have that. I am working
hmm
towards that. Um, but there's these guys that are just
Yeah, there are a lot of lifestyle gurus who have a very inconsistent lifestyle with the guruing that they do online. They'll
yeah
give advice, but they don't seem to be following their advice. Uh, you know, uh, there's a pretty obvious example of that everybody thinks is pretty funny is Liver King, who tells
yeah
everybody eat organ meat, eat
yeah
livers, eat raw meat, and he's just covered with muscles, and
yeah.
he tells everybody that he's completely natural, and then he gets busted, and he's obviously
He was on
unsurprisingly doing
yeah
all kinds of steroids.
he was on HGH, which everyone who looked at his figure could tell he was on
Yeah,
HGH.
yeah,
He had
it's a very specific kind of musculature.
Yeah, he had HGH gut, which
hmm
is when your organs start to push your gut out. So you see like the muscles are there, the abdominal
hmm
muscles are there, but they're like pushed out. So it's like a very ripply hard beer gut is what it looks
hmm
like.
hmm Yeah,
So everyone knew he was already
yeah.
juiced.
Luigi Mangione, who shot that CEO, he had a shirtless pic in his Facebook profile that was making the rounds in all the news media. He had that HGH gut as well, so he's that was one of the things that people were harassing him, as he was being handcuffed and carted off, and reporters were running after him. Hey, are you all natural? It's just like the world we live in, my guy.
Yeah, like that's the important question. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
did you do it
Not
naturally?
not why did you shoot the
Yeah,
CEO?
the
Like, dude,
CEO.
are your muscles real?
Yeah, come on, man.
What a
An-
world.
another thing that's really important before I get into like the strict definition
hmm
with virtue ethics is until well into the 17th century, the Nicomachean Ethics was still widely Nicomachean. Thank you. Was it? See, if they would have just spelled it in Greek, I would have known how to pronounce it. But they gave the English.
Yeah.
Was still widely regarded as the main authority for the discipline of ethics at Protestant universities, with over 50 Protestant commentaries published before 1682. During the 17th century, however, authors such as Francis Bacon and Thomas Hobbes argued that the medieval and Renaissance Aristotelian tradition in practical thinking was impeding philosophy. So this kind of goes back to what we were saying last week about how somewhere around that time, he's talking about the 17th century. Some people might even say it was as far forward as the 18th century, but nobody asked why. We have a comment. Nobody asked why because it was so obvious. What?
Nobody asked him why he shot the CEO.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, we all thought about it.
Yeah. For the sake, yeah. But anyway, so Aristotle.
Well, I mean, when I went to college, I went to a Baptist seminary, the college that was affiliated with it, and we went through Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. I won't say that we went in any depth. We read excerpts, maybe excerpts from 4 chapters. And as an adult later, I slogged through it just as an audiobook, just to be able to say that I had. And there was a lot of good stuff in it. There was some stuff that I was like, and then there were parts of it that were just knuckle dragging, boring. Just could not get through. But I would say overall, very good book. Quite repetitive sometimes.
Well, and it was very important. Like it was held in very high esteem. So even Martin Luther gets a bad rap for saying like people have this idea that Martin Luther had no respect for Aristotle, which is just not it's not true. He would tell people to read it, to read his ethics and logic and stuff like that. And I mean, he had some negative things to say, but I mean,
so would any Christian. The guy was not a Christian. Yeah.
Right. And so,
well, and there's a quote, if I'm recalling correctly, and I don't know the exact words, but Luther said something along the lines of, Aristotle was, despite all of his high learning and all this, he was at the end of the day, he was a fool when compared with a hardworking plowman, or something along those lines. And I'm making an absolute hash of that. But I don't think he was making a dig at Aristotle as much as he was just saying that it's pronounced Nicomachean. Well, thank you for spelling that out like that.
Didn't he just spell it? Isn't that just the way it's spelled?
That's just the way it's spelled. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, it was written for his son Nicomachus. And so it's Nicomachean Ethics because it's for his son Nicomachus. And my professor, when I was at college, told us that it was pronounced Nicomachus, therefore it was Nicomachean Ethics. But anyway, I think that was more that Luther was just making a statement about the fact that the wisest men of this world are fools when compared to the wisdom of God and the wisdom that Scripture brings. I don't think he was actually taking a dig at Aristotle per se.
Right. So all that to say, Aristotle was always held in high esteem until what seems to be very recently. You now have these. What was that statement that we all made fun of that came out?
The Antioch statement.
Yes, the Antioch statement, and it just randomly out of nowhere was saying that Jesus is smarter than Aristotle, or something crazy like that, or Jesus is more important. That the words
Jesus
of Aristotle
is the model of humanity rather than Aristotle.
Yeah,
it's like, well, isn't Doug Wilson the one who taught us to steelman our opponents and only present the very best version of their arguments?
Yeah,
it's like this is not that. This is decidedly not that.
Yeah. And so the reason, so, I'm listening to all these like writing advice stuff, and this came across, and it really clicked, like, wow, what Aristotle was saying is really, it's true, because like what this guy is saying is true as well. And so this gets into the virtue ethics, that you don't just say like, I feel like a good guy, and therefore I'm a good guy.
Hmm.
And so the example that I was thinking of was like, we've seen each other in person numerous times. We've known each other now for a couple years.
Hmm.
I don't even know how long, maybe 3, 4. It's been a while, man. Like,
It's maybe been 5 years, really. I
but
mean,
the
but certainly we know each other a lot better now than we did when we first met.
yeah.
Hmm.
So I can say to you, like, I think that you are a good father. The reason I say that is because I've seen you with your kids. I've seen like your wife, how you interact with her, that kind of stuff. I could say
Hmm.
that because I've seen specific things that you've done,
Hmm.
rather than I went on, I went online and I gave good advice about being a father, right? Like, I said something about being a father, whatever. If I could see it, if you're doing specific things, then that's what actually builds virtue in the person.
Yeah. I
And
mean, to summarize, a good person is someone who does good things. Right? It's like
yeah, yeah,
virtue is ethics.
right.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I don't particularly care about whatever moral system people will come up with unless it actually leads to
Hmm.
building virtue in the person. Um, and so yeah, that's why when you see these people online that will just talk about like how husbands and wives are supposed to interact, but they're not married, or they're not
Hmm.
currently married, but they were married and then they got divorced and now they're single or something like that. Like, well, maybe sit this one out, man.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. My dad taught me at a very young age. He said, "Don't take marriage advice from divorced people." And as a rule of thumb, it's generally good advice. That's not to say that they won't have some insights into, don't make this mistake that I made or that mistake. But for the most part, don't take advice from people who have failed at the thing that they're advising you on. Be that your marriage or raising kids. You wouldn't take parenting advice from someone whose children are just absolutely going ape crazy anytime you see them and tearing the plaster off the walls, right? So,
yeah, but it was a good way of, because I'm currently writing stuff. I've written stuff before,
mhm.
and it's just interesting, like the way that Aristotle just comes out of left field and like hits you like that and just totally makes you think like, oh, maybe I shouldn't just throw this out. Maybe Aristotle's worth something, and people should stop bagging on Aristotle.
Hmm.
So that was just what was on my mind, and I felt like,
Yeah, well, I mean, to be in the Western world is to be Aristotelian. And you don't realize that until you start reading Aristotle, but also the people that oppose Aristotle. And it's kind of one of those things where, a while back there was this young girl, I believe she was either black or Hispanic, but some form of minority, and she tweeted out something that was dumb, par for the course. And she said, well, there's no such thing as white culture, or white people don't have a culture.
mhm,
And obviously that's not true. Anybody who's left the United States knows that there is such a thing as American culture. Anyone who's been to Europe and then left Europe knows that
yeah,
there's such a thing as European culture.
mhm,
There is such a thing, broadly speaking, as white culture. But fish don't know that they're wet.
yeah,
Here she is, she's using a toilet, speaking English, and eating cooked food.
yeah,
And she's saying there's no such thing as white culture. My guy, that is white culture. You're speaking English.
yeah,
You're reading on a screen. Those are things that white Englishmen brought to your society.
yeah,
But like I said, fish don't know that they're wet. Same thing we have going on in Western society. The Western culture is Aristotelian.
yeah,
We live in an Aristotelian world, but people don't study Aristotle And what's more, they've never left Aristotle. You have to leave your country sometimes to appreciate its differences. These people swim in Aristotle every day, and so consequently, they have no concept of what a different worldview other than Aristotelianism would even look like. So yeah,
Yeah.
Doug Wilson can say something like, "Oh, you Aristotelians, I can't believe you magnify this person as much as the person of Christ when we should only be looking to Christ." And Pastor Doug, Paul seems to be pretty Aristotelian.
Yeah.
I mean, the world that they lived in, as the world that we live in now, was Aristotelian. That is the language of scriptures brought down to us. You can't divorce the germ from the seed. It played a part.
Yeah. I want to address a comment in the chat. Dickie S, or is it Dickies? I don't know how to pronounce
Dickie.
it. Just because my wife left me doesn't mean I have nothing to offer. That was not what was said. What we are saying is that the things that you do show who you are.
hmm
And I don't mean that in like when people say like, oh, atheists don't read the Bible, they read Christians kind of thing, where they're saying like, well, they see you and that's how they judge it. That's
hmm
not what I'm saying. I'm saying the things that you do are what show your virtues and what
hmm
show what is important to you. It's like when people say like, oh, I don't have time to do XYZ, but they have time to doom scroll on their phone for an hour. Well, that's an hour that you had to do something else that you could have done. Like, you will make time for the things that are important. You will do the things that you believe to be right, and you can train yourself to become a more virtuous person by doing things that are virtuous.
hmm hmm
Um, that being
Yeah.
said, if you're if you're someone who has a past of something, yeah, you can get yourself out of that. You can move forward and you can do new things and have a new marriage or whatever the thing is. But if you're currently at a state where you are not at the place where you're telling others to be, maybe sit it out for a bit.
hmm
Just go and, work it out for yourself.
Yeah. Well, and there's kind of this whole thorny issue about, what I said earlier was, good people do good things, but that doesn't mean that good people never do bad things. Of course, that's one thing that I had to really work with my kids on, because they'd see a family friend or a family member do something bad, and they would say, "Oh, are they a bad person?" And sometimes the answer is yes, that's a bad person. That's why she did what they did, is because they are a bad person. But sometimes the answer is no, that's a good person who's doing a bad thing. There are good people who do bad people who do good things, and there are more often than not, good people are doing good things and bad people are doing bad things. And you kind of parse, there's kind of a bar halfway in the middle where it's like, okay, bad people on this side, good people on this side. But you make that determination based on kind of what people do. That's how a tree is known by its fruit, right? You
Yeah.
know if a person is good or bad because they will give good fruit or they will give bad fruit.
Says, I don't have, yeah.
I don't have time for my friend's podcast.
Yeah.
Well,
And
here
yet
you are, you
here
liar.
you are. Yeah. There you go. Let's get
Well,
to the next thing, because I really want to talk about this topic, and I feel like it's going to take
all right.
a
This
long
will
time.
probably end up taking the lion's share. So,
Yeah.
what I'm going to do is, so let's start this all off by saying the context, obviously, of this conversation has to do with the war in Ukraine. So, Russia and Ukraine been at war for what feels like a very long time now. In the grand scheme of things, this is not a very long time for a war to be around. But Russia invades Ukraine, starts taking territory, seizes quite a bit of territory very quickly, and then hits a speed bump along the way. But all of the Western world, all of Europe and the United States, have been funding this war. This has been a proxy war of sorts because Ukraine is using Western equipment. It's using Western observers who are, I'm sure, just like the observers in Vietnam, just observing and nothing more. And, they've been using our money, and Trump has kind of come in like a bulldozer and put a stop to a lot of it. He wants a peace deal. Europe does not want a peace deal, or I say Europe, the leaders of Europe do not want a peace deal. They seemingly want to drag this thing on forever. But we have. I'm going to go ahead and swap over to this right here. So Trump says NATO members should spend 5% of GDP on defense. This has been a thing forever. He's been saying that NATO's not holding up their end of the deal. We saw this when he was president last time around, that he came in and he said, y'all need to start holding up your end of the bargain. And for the most part, most European countries actually started doing better. That's not to say that they were doing everything that they're supposed to be doing by the deals that were made, the treaties that they have. But things got a little bit better as soon as he was out of office. Just immediately, things changed back to the way they were. But the United States has the world's largest military. Interestingly, the United States has the world's largest Air Force in the United States Air Force. It has the world's second largest Air Force in the United States Navy.
Yep.
And it has the world's fourth largest Air Force in the United States Army. So,
whoa!
or it might be fifth, but
what would that be, like Blackhawks and stuff? Like
mostly rotary wing, but also fixed wing because they have a lot of
Really?
transport ships. Well, transport
Oh, I see what you're saying.
transport
Okay.
airplanes. So
I
most of
forgot about those, which is crazy because I've ridden
they have
on
a
those.
ton of them. Yeah, yeah.
You feel like cargo. It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, these cargo planes are massive, and we just have a ton of them. So, the United States has the world's largest army by a lot, and it's not even close. But how do people join the army? I mean, so go ahead and tell us, Sean, how did you join the United States Army when you did?
I walked into the recruiter's office in Modesto, California, and 30 days later, I was at Fort Jackson in basic training.
Mm-hmm.
It was really that easy. I went in, they said I was a clean packet, which means like no additional paperwork, no tattoos to document,
Mm-hmm.
no criminal record to document, no
Yep. No
waivers,
history of drugs, no
yeah,
medical problems.
yeah, nothing to waiver, nothing to document. Just get out of here.
You were just their favorite candidate.
Yeah,
So the United
that was
States
it.
Army is a volunteer army,
Correct.
pure and simple. There is nothing about the United States Army is not volunteer. But it was not always this way. The United States Army has had a draft at multiple times, but we have never had. Well, let's go over this a little bit. Recruitment rises 12.5% despite ongoing challenges. So the United States Army is having problems because people aren't volunteering for the United States Army in the rates that they were in the past. The number has been going up. You can see here it's up to 200,000 in 2023, to 25 in 2024. But the number that they're shooting for is actually quite a bit higher than that. And this is from the defense.gov website. If you're interested in that, you can find it pretty quickly and easily. But point being, the United States has a a volunteer army, but not all countries in the world have a volunteer army. And right now, we are seeing a little bit of change potentially. So Starmer Keir Starmer is the Prime Minister of the UK at the moment. He is a communist. He is a very, very evil man. But he came out earlier today, actually, which was fortuitous timing because I've been thinking about his comments on this all week. But Starmer says the US is right about the UK and Europe needing to take more responsibility for defense. So Trump, I mean, he's not going to say Trump, he's going to say the US.
Yeah.
But this is Trump. Trump has been saying NATO's not holding up their side of the bargain. You know, the United States pays for 88% of all NATO activity. 88% of that money is coming from one country, and that's not fair, not at all. Because if we're going to have an empire where we fund the armies of the world, at least we should be getting something out of it. And maybe with this peace deal in Ukraine, that's what Trump is going to
Can
get
I
us, is
can
some
I say
recompense.
can I just
Go
say
ahead.
really quick?
Uh-huh.
One of the arguments people will make about that we pay the vast majority, like everyone knows we do the vast majority, but
Mm-hmm.
what they will say is we are also the only country in the history of NATO to enact whatever article it is where you get like other countries automatically have to jump in. I forget which article of NATO that is, but like I believe in Iraq and possibly Afghanistan, we called in that favor.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
we
and
had,
well, and some countries, like the UK, responded. Some countries, like France, begrudgingly responded, but not all NATO members showed up in Iraq and Afghanistan. That was not a
correct.
universal.
Yeah.
It was really only the countries that wanted to, and
Yeah.
also the countries that could, which is not even all the countries that wanted to. You know, Poland at the time did not have an army. I mean, Poland has a pretty decent army now, but at the time when we were going into Iraq and Afghanistan, Poland didn't have an army to speak of.
Sweden had the best hookup because all of their furniture was IKEA. I'm not making that.
Yeah,
That sounds like a really dumb joke, but it's true. They were an all IKEA army. It was awesome.
they were just really good at that compartmentalization.
Yeah. And then like
Yeah.
the German army would have like Mercedes Benz like 5 tons, and
Hmm.
it was crazy, man. It was like a stereotype extravaganza over there.
Yeah. So, Prime Minister Keir Starmer, speaking at the Scottish Labour Conference in Glasgow on Sunday, said he is clear Britain will take a leading responsibility in protecting the continent. Now, he's been saying things like this for the last couple of weeks, where he's been saying the UK needs to, we need to have conscription, young men need to be forced to join the army, and he's even been saying that they need to deploy their troops in Ukraine to enforce whatever kind of peace deal comes down the pike. And Trump's been saying, you know, we need to have a different kind of peace deal with uninvolved third party, third worlders, even marching up and down the line between Russia and the Ukraine. But you know, bad ideas abound. But anyway, it's very interesting that Keir Starmer had this to say about, you know, conscription, when part of the party platform that he ran on is that the previous prime minister and he had shouting matches about the fact that Rishi Sunak wanted to have a conscription, wanted to have young men joining the army. And you know, this is him back in 2024, back before he was the prime
A
minister.
clear direction, not the endless spinning around that successive Tory governments have subjected us all to. The Prime Minister, with a new plan every week, a new strategy every month, at this rate, a new election campaign every day.
Fair enough.
I'm not joking. All this spinning round and round, it's symbolic of the chaos and the instability. You've seen that again over the past.
So, you know, strong words for a homosexual Englishman. but strong words for who he is against this idea that you should have 18-year-olds joining the military for 12 months, saying it's going to be a teenage dad's army. You know, first off, as if that's a bad thing. I can think of far worse things for teenage dads to be doing. You know,
Yeah.
isn't that kind of a demographic that we hear about all the time? You know, he was a good kid, he was a dad, and he was a loving father. It's like you hear these sob stories every time somebody gets arrested for some violent crime about how he was
Yeah.
a good teenage dad. Maybe being in the army would be better for him than
Yeah.
what he's doing now. But anyway, um, conscription in the UK. Now, there was a video that I saw on Instagram, and I'm just going to have to relay it to you, and you're going to have to take my word on it because I could not for the life of me find it. I thought I bookmarked it. Even, Instagram is not very searchable. So when I tried to search it on Instagram, it didn't really work. But, there was a UK government representative. It was not a member of parliament, but it was someone in government, in the ruling government, uh, put out this Instagram video that may have been wiped by now, which might be why I couldn't find it, but where they said a conscripted army would be more representative because, of course, the army in the UK, as the army in the US, is much more white male than the general population.
Mhm.
But it'd be an excellent opportunity for sexual and racial minorities to have a say in their country's future. And I'm sure that's what every red-blooded Englishman wants in his army is to be represented by homosexual black African women who are going to go off and fight his wars and protect
Yeah.
his country,
Yeah.
as if that would ever happen.
All
Now,
the
here's
all
the
the
thing:
people that Doug Wilson has more in common with
more in
than
common with, yes,
actual Englishmen. Yeah.
yeah, his unnatural affection for them, so to speak. But even though, and I know this is Keir Starmer. He's literally a communist. I mean, it's the Labour Party of Britain. They are a communist party. Um, Despite the fact that it's outed communists who are proposing this, I don't actually think it's a bad idea. So, before we get into it too far, I have a bit of a story to tell you. There was this young man that I knew who was I won't say he was unimpressive, but he was just a very normal kind of a kid, right? Nothing to write home about, but a good kid. He worked for his dad in the business that they had, and he would do odd jobs around town. He was about 17, 18 years old, and he went off to a proto military camp. It's technically not military because there were no firearms involved, but it's this camp in East Texas, Big Sandy, where they go off and they do firefighter training and medical stuff and evac, and it is grueling like boot camp. I mean, the people who go there, they say, "Man, this is just like boot camp." Uh, but it's a Christian organization, so it's a little, run a little different than an army boot camp. There's no swearing allowed for one thing, but a very interesting outfit. So this friend of mine went off to this camp, and he came back, and he had been there for, I want to say, 6 months. So that's a long time, for that's a long time for a boot camp, but this is more like getting a college education in EMS. Most of the graduates go off and become you know, some form of EMT, some form of firefighter. That's their main thing. Some of them go off and become officers in the military. They'll have a program where they're getting a degree at the same time, something like that. But anyway, this friend of mine comes back from this program. He's been in the program for 6 months, and he was unrecognizable. He was no longer shy. He'd look you dead in the eyes when he's talking to you. He's no longer scared of women, which is for me, as a teenager that was his same age, that was just absolutely shocking to me. It's like he didn't get a girlfriend, but he was no longer scared to talk to women. He seemed taller because he always walked around hunched over like this. He came back and he stuck his chest out and he stuck his shoulders out, and he had muscles that he didn't have before because he's been eating and he's been running and he's been lifting weights and he's been doing, rock climbing and, uh, rappelling from a rock wall, all of these activities that guys just love, right? I mean, if somebody told you you're going to have to go to school for 6 months and do all of this, it's like, yeah, it's going to be hard work, but you're going to really enjoy it and you're going to get something out of it at the end of it. So that's my personal experience with it. I saw a friend of mine go off to this proto-military, quasi-military boot camp, and he came back from it absolutely a changed man, and I think he was far the better for it. But anyway, here are some examples of countries that already do this. So Switzerland, mandatory military service, Militärdienst, in the Swiss army for all able-bodied male citizens who are conscripted when they reach the age of majority, which in Switzerland is 18. Women may volunteer for any position. Now, Switzerland has long kind of been famous for their conscription program because most of Europe has not had a conscription, mandatory military service, but Switzerland has always had mandatory military service. I mean, since the time when they were the guardians of the Pope, back in the 1500s, right? These people have mandatory. Everybody in Switzerland, if you're in the Kingdom of Switzerland, when you hit age of majority, when you're 18 years old, you join the military. And I believe their services are for 24 months, but it probably says right here. So I'm
I'd
not
be
seeing it right
interested
off
to
the bat.
hear. I would be very interested to hear what that actually looks like. Like
Mhm.
what 2 years would look like, because you're not really useful until maybe 6 months into training.
Mhm.
And even then, there's a lot of on the job stuff that you have
Yeah.
to learn. So like 1 year of conscription, or maybe even like 2 years, that just seems like you wouldn't really get the most out of it.
Mhm.
I did 4 years to the day, and
Mhm.
even that felt like they got the very least out of me.
Mhm.
I
Like
did the
there
one.
was there was still a lot that you could have learned and done better.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, it was just I got in a really weird time where they were trying to kick people out. Like they
Mhm.
were downsizing quite a bit in around like 2013. But yeah, I mean, I did the one deployment, and then it felt like right after that I was out. And
Mhm.
so it was like, well, I guess you got your one deployment out of me, but like
Yeah.
I don't know, it just felt. And then some people had shorter contracts than I did. Like they would do something like I think it was like 3 years plus training or something like that. So
Mhm.
it was like 3 years from whatever day you got out of AIT, which is like the after. It's the more it's advanced
Mhm.
individual training. So it's like
Mhm.
you learn your MOS at AIT.
Yeah, you get out of
Um,
boot camp, you go to AIT.
yeah.
Mhm.
So I mean that sounds crazy to me. 2 years, because at my 2 year point, I would have been in the middle of my deployment. From like, if you count like from the day that I got in and until like 2 years, actually I would have been 1 month into my deployment at the 2 year mark. So it just
Mhm.
seems like 2 years. Like what are you gonna what are you
What are you
really gonna get?
accomplishing in that time?
Yeah, what are you
Yeah,
gonna
and
get
I
out of
think
this person?
I think the state is actually not trying to achieve an end goal much beyond just the improvements that I mentioned about my friend, whose name I will not say. I keep
Sure.
almost saying it, but he's we'll just call him John. Uh, John, went off to this military school and he came back a man. He came back very much improved, and I think that's what the Swiss are trying to shoot for, so to speak. One of the things that the Swiss are also very well known for is If you are in the service, which you remain in the service in reserves until you are 30 years old. So you get in at 18, get out at 30. And until you are 30 years old, you are issued fatigues, boots, and a rifle. And if you are called upon, which is done randomly, you have to respond to that call, excuse me, within a certain allotted amount of time. And I don't remember exactly how long that is, but it's not a lot of time. They have, as it were, a Minuteman system where you own a fully automatic military grade rifle that just sits in your closet or on your shelf, and if you get called, you pick it up and you show up to your commanding officer and you report for duty within a certain time limit. And if you don't, you're going to get in a whole lot of trouble, so to speak.
Yeah,
So
can I speak to that real quick?
mhm,
So in the U.S. military, every initial contract is actually 8 years minimum. But
mhm,
what that means, like for me, was 4 years active, 4 years what's called inactive reserve. So you don't have to report anywhere.
mhm,
Um, it's just a matter of like they can pick you up and you got to go.
mhm.
Um, so mine was 4 years, and it was, what year would that have been that I got out? It would have been 2000, no, 17. Yeah, so like the
Mhm.
early part of 2017, which means that during that 2016 election, I was pretty nervous because Hillary Clinton was like, "We're going to war with
Yeah.
Russia if I
Uh-huh.
become president." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh my goodness, I'm only going to have a couple of months left of IR, and
Mhm.
I don't want to get called because some dumb woman wants to go to war with
Wants to go to
Russia."
war with Russia. Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it's pretty nerve-wracking. Like
Yeah,
I
close
was I
save.
was freaking out.
Mhm.
I was not happy about that.
Yeah. Well, here's another example of a European nation. According to Section 81 of the Constitution of Denmark, every Danish male adult has to complete military service. Every male person able to bear arms shall be liable with his person to contribute to the defense of his country under such rules as are laid down by statute. And they have a new addendum to that beginning in January 1st of 2027. Females will have to serve between 4 and 12 months. So that's one of the things that I don't like about this conscription that we're seeing a lot of popping up around the world is that somebody is leading the charge on this, and Israel has always had female conscription. I mean, I don't know about always, but since the very beginning that I'm aware of, female conscription has been mandatory, or at least has been practiced in Israel. Now, there are people in Israel who are able to be um, people who, for religious reasons, are exempted from this. But the people who take this exemption actually pay a tax for the ability to not have your daughters drafted into the military. You have to pay a tax, and
Boy, isn't that the most uh, Israeli thing that you could imagine? Like, yeah, are you sure my daughter has to fight in the war? I can give you some money.
yeah, it's like, well, I mean, just the idea too that at the other end of that you have a state that is extorting money from you with the threat that if you do not give them that money, then your daughter is going to go off and die in a war somewhere.
Yeah,
Uh, that's
it's ridiculous.
fantastic. But you know, um, there are certain religious groups that don't have to be conscripted, but like I said, they pay a tax. And I'm not necessarily against the idea of paying a tax just because you're not. I mean, if you don't want to join the army, I think paying for it is a probably probably not a bad substitution. Um, now, uh, so anyway, one of the reasons that I wanted to bring this up is we're probably going to see more of this showing up in European countries because because Trump has made it very clear that he's upset with the fact the United States is paying for 88% of NATO. We essentially are floating their entire military budget. There was a famous meme that went around the internet several years ago where there was an American aircraft carrier with a British aircraft carrier next to it, and it looked like a model of a ship next to a real ship. I mean, it was just the size differential between these two things was just extraordinary, and some some Brit in the comments said, "What are you compensating for?" Trying to make some reference to something about, maybe we're lacking in masculinity and we have to compensate for it by having a large uh, army. And someone else responded to him and said, "Yeah, we're compensating for something. We're compensating for weak allies."
Yep, I
It's like,
remember that one.
yeah, that's exactly what's going on. The United States is the world's military. It is, the entire world, at least as far as Europe is concerned, is our. uh, they belong to us. All your countries are belong to us now, and there's not anything you can do about it. It is the way it is, and the
There's a
Ukraine.
there's an element of uh, where the like European countries will talk about like, oh, the U.S. is in all this debt, and
Hmm.
like look at how much they spend on their military budget compared to
Hmm.
everyone else, and they'll like mock us because we spend too much money. But
Hmm.
what is the alternative? First of all, and then second of all, they don't have to spend that money because we spend that money. So they know that, oh, well, we have NATO. So if it pops
Hmm.
off, if Russia gets an itchy trigger finger, we know America will come in and win the war for us because they're the only people that spend money on the military. Uh,
Right.
it's not NATO's just not a good deal for the United States. It's a great deal
Well,
for everyone else, but
yeah, and I don't think NATO was ever intended to be a good deal for the United States. Um, you know, uh, NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, was created for the purpose of, protecting Europe from Russia. Um, the United States didn't need NATO. Um, NATO, Europe needed the United States, and that's why they formed this treaty was to get the United States an official backing from Europe so that they could work as one against the armies of Eastern Europe. Um, but anyway, so moving on to kind of the next thing, which is in the United States, we do not have conscription. We have a completely volunteer force, and there have been arguments made by folks who that the reason that our army is the best is because it's a strictly volunteer force, that there are no people in the army who don't want to be. And there is something to that. If you read the Old Testament, when God tells Israel how to go to war righteously, one of the things he says is, form your army and then say to them, hey, if you're scared, if you're a coward, go home. If you don't want to be here, you don't have to be here. That was an integral part of the righteous warfare of the Old Testament, is that it was at least at that level a volunteer force. Now, of course, you're going to have shame involved with that. You put all your armor on, you get out to battle, and then right before battle, the king says, "By the way, if you're a coward, go home." It's like, what self-respecting man? You've got come
yeah,
this far. Are you going to be
yeah.
like, "Oh yeah,
Oh,
by the way,
me.
that's
Yeah.
me. I'm a coward. I'm going home." It's like, that's that
I left
that
the oven on. Oh no.
yeah. Uh, yeah, I don't think um, I don't think most people are going to take that. But, if there is a an unpopular war, and you get your armies, then you go out there, and everybody's like, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
I'm not fond of this war. I just want to go home. If you give them that option, they are going to take it. So it is kind of a check and balance on the authority of the king. Just an interesting subject to kind of throw back to last week.
Can I just, okay, first of all, I just want to say, like, in the comments, a lot of the times, if you just say like LOL or that was silly or something, like, I don't know what you're referring to. You gotta talk in complete sentences. Like, think like sixth grade, restate the question, that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But let's talk about this here. Most folks in the army don't want to be there. Yeah, I guess that's true to an
Yeah,
extent.
that's why they keep re-enlisting.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's the other thing.
It's like,
I knew a guy and he was the guy that was like, "Oh man, dude, like the army sucks. Like, why are we even
yeah,
here?"
yeah,
And then we got to our deployment and he was just like, "Oh man, I hate these people I'm with. I'm gonna kill myself." Like, he's just like crazy stuff that he would say,
yeah, yeah.
right?
Uh,
And but while you're in or while you're during a deployment, your everything you make is tax free. And
hmm
so if you re-enlist and you get a bonus, it's a tax-free bonus. So
mm.
all the
So if you're overseas, you re-enlist when your time comes up.
yeah, so all the
Mm.
retention NCOs are like, "Hey man, it's time. Here's your window."
Yeah.
Uh and then that this guy that I was this specific guy was suddenly, when it was time, he's like, "Well, I talked to my dad. There's really no jobs back home, and I'm
hmm
going to do
hmm
this." So you could say, well, maybe he says he didn't want to be there, but again, let's go back to the virtue ethics things.
Yeah, yeah.
What you really want
Is
is
what you.
what you're going to do.
hmm
Um, Tax free for real deployments. What is a real deployment?
I
I
guess
don't
he's talking about
I
if you get
know.
like stationed in Germany or Korea.
Yeah, but
That's
that's not a deployment. Nobody
yeah,
calls
that's
that a deployment. That's just your
yeah.
duty station. It's just overseas duty station.
hmm
Um, yeah, he also says it's fun to be army until it's time to do army stuff. I will say
I
this.
don't know. That's when it's fun to be army, is when you're doing army
Yes,
stuff.
there
It's when
was
you're sweeping the motor pool that
yeah,
it's not fun.
there was a study done. I want to say they started doing this in Vietnam, where they were checking heart rates of soldiers who were like
hmm
in just the worst front lines, like the real deal.
hmm
And they found that their heart rates were just going nonstop, like really high, when nothing was happening.
hmm
And the people who were there would say stuff like, man, like, I wish they would just shoot at us already. Like, they were
hmm
just antsy.
hmm
Their heart rates were always up. But as soon as bullets started flying, their heart
They
rates
actually calm
dropped.
down.
Yeah, they
hmm
dropped. So like I mean, that's physiological evidence that that's what people are looking forward to.
hmm
Because there's that antsiness of like, man, is it gonna happen? I don't know.
Yeah, the
Uh,
anticipation is often worse than the thing itself, right?
yeah,
Doesn't uh, doesn't really matter what you're talking about, whether it's like, blackmail, people are blackmailing you, and it's like, oh man, the anticipation of they're going to reveal my
yeah,
secrets to the world. The
yeah,
anticipation is almost always worse than the thing itself. So it's best just to get it out.
yeah,
Just go and do it, get it over with. That's the advice that people who have been through stuff, so to speak, give
yeah.
a lot of the time.
Hey, I don't know what direction you were going with this, but
Yeah. So
I wanted to say a couple of things before.
hmm
Uh, so you had mentioned Denmark, right?
hmm
One of my favorite anecdotes, I don't know how true the story is or what time it's supposed to be from or whatever, but the story is essentially this man who is not Danish, he goes to Denmark and he's with this kid, and the kid points out and he says, um, yeah, I'm going to address this after this. But the guy goes to Denmark. He's with this kid, and the kid says, "Hey, do you know who that is?" He's like, "I don't know who that is." He said, "That's the king of all Denmark." And the guy said, "Well, where's his bodyguards?" And the kid says, "Well, all of Denmark is his bodyguards." Right. So that kind of goes back to last week's episode. We're talking about monarchy and that loyalty and like people being willing to die for their king. Nobody wants to die for a nebulous set of liberal ideas. Nobody wants to die for that. Nobody, as much as Democrats try to politicize the average soldier in World War II, the average American soldier, like they just wanted to go and like they wanted to fight so that their great grandkids could cut their genitals off and be the opposite sex or whatever crazy
Yeah, that's
thing.
definitely what they were.
Yeah, that's what they were fighting for. Yeah, no, but nobody wants to fight for that. You fight for a people. A people is worth fighting for.
A nation, perhaps.
Well, yeah, and that's what I'm saying. A nation, as in, if I go die, my kids are back here, and the people that they are going to marry are back here, and so I know that I'm fighting for my future generations. I know that because I don't just have this nebulous economic zone that people are always coming in and out of, and half of them aren't documented, and there's all these political parties based on race, and there's like the black coalition within whatever. Nobody wants to die for that. What you want to die for, if you're going to die for anything, is so that your people and your ideals and all that kind of stuff is going to go ahead and live on, not just a nebulous.
So that something can live on beyond yourself. Yeah.
Yes.
And well, I mean, my perspective on that, I agree with General Patton when he said no soldier ever won a war by dying for his country.
Yeah.
He won a war by making the other poor sucker die for his.
Yeah.
So don't die for your country. Make the other guy die for his.
Real quick, I don't know what exactly is meant by this, that overseas duty stations are considered sort of deployments. I don't know exactly what you mean by that. Like, for instance, I have an Afghanistan ribbon that looks like that. Which one is it? It's hard to see in my camera. It's one of these two. It's not this one. I think it's the
red and green.
Yeah, it's one that looks like the Afghanistan colors. That is a specifically Afghanistan flag. There is no Germany flag. You don't get like a German flag ribbon. You get like overseas service.
Yeah, but that's not a combat.
But ribbon. That's not a. So I'm not sure exactly what is meant by that.
Yeah, I think leaving that aside. So just to go over some one historical example of how military service was handled in the past. There once was once upon a time there was a country called Prussia. This is the country where my family are from, and Prussia came upon the scene as a little bitty state with not much going on. And it went from being this tiny backwater, as it were, nation to the central power in Europe. And it did it through a military recruitment strategy that was devised by Frederick the Great. And this was called the canton system. So it was, first thing he did was he disbanded the militia, got rid of a lot of his officer corps, and went to a strictly went to a system of conscription, which was very typical of the militaries in Europe at the time, where they would grab people off the street. Are you, quick interview. Do you have a place to sleep tonight? Who are you with? Where do you live? Don't have an answer to that? In the brig you go. We're putting you on a boat. We're sending you off to France. You're going to fight in our war. That kind of a thing. And he got rid of that and replaced it with the canton system, which is where they segmented the country into, as it were, little duchies, little cantons, and each of those cantons had a certain number of people that they had to give to the military every year, and they had to be physically fit, tall young men from common people, especially villagers. Soldiers lived short terms of active duty during peacetime and pursued their livelihoods the rest of the time. So these were reservists, but he achieved a 3%. Does it say it here? I'm not seeing it in this little blurb. I had it pulled up in Wikipedia, but the article was just too unmanageable. But he achieved something 3%, almost 4%, if I'm remembering correctly, 3.8% of the entire population of Prussia was military, which caused one statesman to joke, European nations have armies, but the Prussian army have a state.
Yeah.
Yeah, that their army was just so much larger than everybody around them, and it was because of this canton system. So that's an example of military service through the lens of a real country that did exist in the past. Um, Here is something that happened in our own history: suffrage through service. How military service expanded voting rights. This is from the Wisconsin Veterans Museum. So a lot of people don't know this, but prior to the Civil War, voting was not universal. Voting was not universal even to, white men of good character. You had to have um, evidence that you were able to sustain yourself, that you were a person of good character, but also that you were a person of property. You had to, as it were, have skin in the game.
Yep.
And during the Civil War, Union soldiers found themselves far from home with the presidential election happening in the middle of the war. And there was an interesting book I read from the perspective of one of these soldiers. He was actually in the Illinois infantry, and he his evaluation of that election is that it was not a fair election at all, and that the officers essentially rubber stamped the soldiers' votes in order to keep Lincoln in office, in order to keep their jobs, because they were making money by being off at war.
Oh yeah.
But so they had absentee voting, um, women's suffrage that came about quite a bit later. Um, but the idea that everybody was going to be able to vote got expanded quite a bit um, during the Civil War and quickly thereafter. So in the United States, we haven't had a canton system, but we did have this, the draft was instituted. And when they sold us the draft, the thing that they told us was, hey, the draft is going to be, yeah, you're going to have the option of being drafted, but the reason that you get that is because you get to vote. All men get drafted, but all men get to vote. And then they expanded that voting right to women, but they didn't expand the draft to women. And so you have a lot of liberals and leftists saying, well, to make things equal, let's draft the women, like Denmark's doing, like Israel does. Let's make it mandatory for the women to be part of the army as well. I have a very different take, which is the men get to vote because of the draft, and so the women shouldn't get to vote.
The one of those drafts was the reason they dropped the voting age to 18. Do you remember which one off the top of your head that was?
I don't remember, but
because it used to be, I think 21.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, it was World War I, but I might be off.
And the issue that people had was, you have this 18-year-old who's fighting for democracy or whatever BS
and he doesn't get to vote.
Giving. Yeah, whatever
like,
BS reason that they gave kids back then to go fight in World War I.
Yeah. Let's go save that democracy that you're not allowed to participate in. It's a hard sell,
My favorite meme of that is the guy who's kind of doing like he's got his hands on his hip, whatever, and he's saying, like, how did our democracy get over in Afghanistan?
Yeah.
Like, why do I
You
have to go over
silly
there?
democracy. What are you doing
Yeah.
over there? Golly, can't believe it.
Dickie
Yeah,
in the chat is saying that it was Vietnam. And
Vietnam.
that was what I was thinking as well, that it was
Okay.
Vietnam. That makes sense because that's about when America lost the last marbles that it had rolling around in its head. So
He talking about when the
they
voting.
changed the voting age to 18, the drinking age to 21.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that
yeah,
was during Vietnam when they did that. Yeah, and
that's
then
funny.
they just recently changed the smoking age to 21, and it's
Yep.
just insane. Can't could we just, for the sake of sanity, have one age? All right. Once you hit this age, you're allowed to drive, you're allowed to drink, maybe not at the same
Yeah,
time. You're allowed
yeah,
to smoke, you're allowed to vote.
yeah.
There's your four things. And before that age, you can't do it. After that age, you can. Why don't we just make it universal, right? It
You
was
know
the
what was really
Vietnam War that
crazy?
decreased voter poll.
The craziest thing for me was I turned 21 in Germany. So
Hmm.
there was a time when I was in Germany and I
Too
was
young to drink.
not yeah, I was like 20 or 19 and I couldn't drink or I couldn't buy alcohol on post, but
Yeah.
I could go to the bar
Hmm.
and I could drink there
Yeah.
and because Germany was like, "Oh yeah, you're 18, you're an adult." But
Yeah.
but I can carry an AR or a M4. I
Yeah.
could have an M4 and I could shoot that, but I can't, buy American liquor. Like,
Yeah.
silly.
Bizarre. How bizarre. So anyway, this is kind of the idea that I wanted to finish off with, which is there are, armies of the world around armies around the world have to be supplied with men to throw into the meat grinder.
Yep.
And because the United States is no longer going to be the world's super bully, at least for the next 3 years, countries around the world are having to grapple with the fact that they're going to need to create an army capable of defending their own borders. And so here is so I've mentioned before that I'm a big fan of the book Starship Troopers, and I am going to bring it up once again. So in Starship Troopers Federal Service, in order to become a citizen in the Federation, a
Yeah.
civilian must serve in the Federation or another capacity, such as teaching, being experimental subject for at least 2 years. So you had to be a soldier
Yep.
and with his later books he kind of expanded that, but I liked it better in the first book where it was, no, if you want to vote, you have to join the army.
Yep.
And if you're going to have a voting system, getting back to last week's program, if you're going to have a voting system where the people vote, um, they need to have skin in the game. The way that our country was founded, it was not just every Tom, Dick, and Harry who could vote. You had to be someone who had property, who was of good character, who was from there, who was the nationality. You had to be someone who, because by virtue of your status in society, you had skin in the game, then you were allowed to vote. Otherwise, you were just going to get a bunch of baby mamas voting for handouts, voting for food stamps increase, which is what we have today. You
Yep.
got a bunch of baby mamas rolling around on food stamps voting for more handouts. Well, you can't be surprised when that's happening. Democracy in America de Tocqueville. America will last until the people discover that they can vote themselves money. And that's what we've got going on right now. Now, of course, the easy fix for that, would be a monarchy, like Samuel advocated for last week.
Yep.
But this is another option right here, which is federal service. If you want to if you want to vote, if you want to have a say, you need to literally risk your life.
That
This
was
is
also how they could get to the front of the line for being able to have babies if the book holds true to or if the
Yeah,
movie
yeah,
holds
that
true to the
there
book.
was
That was a big
population control, and if you wanted a
yeah.
child, you had to. As a matter of fact, I think if you wanted a pet, you civilians were not allowed to have children or pets, whereas citizens were. So not necessarily something I'm fond of, but true
And
to
that
the
kind of
true to the lore
goes,
of the book.
that kind of goes to what Z in the chat is saying here of a manhood rite of passage. So he uses the example of killing a woolly mammoth, which is a little cartoonish in 2025, but I think it still kind of holds true. Like, go overseas and shoot a third worlder, and now you can vote and drink
Yep.
and smoke and do all that
hmm
cool
You got to
stuff.
you
I
got to
mean,
kill one and then rub his blood on your face, and then it's after
yeah,
that you're a
give it
brave
a
and you can do all the stuff. Yeah.
yeah.
But
There you go.
where he's talking about those woolly mammoths they've been promising my whole life, they're actually trying to clone woolly mammoths and make, you know, and turn that into a reality. We're going to meme that into reality, my guy. We're going to hunt woolly mammoths in packs with with AR-10s,
I would.
dude.
I mean, if given the opportunity, you wouldn't do that. Come on, don't lie
Yeah.
to me.
So interesting caveat going on here, which I think is of note. Within this, of course, theoretical place, federal service had to accept all candidates who wished to join. They were only allowed to reject an applicant if that person was judged to be mentally unfit. So, yeah, you could only get the right to vote by joining the military, but the military had to accept you. You didn't have, as it were, an option uh, where, you know, the military couldn't be too choosy about who came along. But spears only. Come on, this is to separate the men from the
Yep,
boys.
I'm
My
with you.
guy, if I am
With you on
on
that.
foot, if I am on foot against a woolly mammoth, an
That's the way they did it,
AR-10 is
man.
still going to be pretty,
Actually,
pretty scary.
have you ever heard the widely accepted theory now that the way that man hunted woolly mammoths was essentially just walking around with them until the mammoth tired out? Like, it
Hmm.
wasn't like this crazy, like everyone's chucking spears and whatever. It was, they would see the mammoth and the mammoth would be like, "Oh, I don't want to be around these guys." And so they would
Hmm.
start walking off, and they're trying to go fast or whatever, but the humans would just kind of do do do
Jog along
do,
beside him.
not
Yeah.
even jog, just walk,
Huh.
because they have to keep, the mammoth has to keep going. It doesn't matter how quickly you go. So the
hmm
theory is they would just tire out, and then you're like chucking spears. Like, so it wasn't really
Yeah.
much of a fight. You tire them out just by walking close to them. So
Hmm.
all
Hmm.
that to
Well, I
say,
do know that people on the savannah in Africa still hunt elephants like that to this day. So
oh,
it,
okay,
it
well,
would
there you
not
go.
be that surprising to hear that to hear the theory that they did that back then. I don't think people have gotten any dumber or any smarter. They probably have gotten dumber, but I don't think that that doesn't seem far-fetched.
So what is your take on conscription in the United States?
So
What would,
overall, my experience with conscription, I have never been in the United States military. I have never been through a boot camp. I have never been through EMT school. I did not go off to Big Sandy to join the ATI or whatever that group is called. But I have friends who have done all of those things. My big takeaway is I think conscription is actually a good thing. I think when a young man turns 18, joining the military, going off to boot camp, and interestingly, in Ireland, they actually have a system where the military teaches you a trade. And then if you want to get out early, you have to kind of comp them for the school that you did. So if you join, they're not just going to teach you a trade like here's how to fix this proprietary equipment that only we have, and then you get out of the army and you're like, now what? I've got a skill that I can only do. I joined the army and they taught me how to 360 no scope a Muslim guy from across a rooftop. And it's like, okay, now I'm in the civilian economy and they're telling me that I need to be a cashier and I don't know
yeah.
how to count. It's like,
Well, hey, if
so
you're a
the,
cashier at a gas station, that might come in handy. That experience.
yeah, an inner city gas station.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I
But
feel like I'm back in the army. This is great.
yeah, but anyway, So the Irish military teaches you a trade, at least in theory. You join the military, they teach you a trade, and then when you get out, you will have, paid for yourself and your schooling by the time that your tour is over. Uh, Whereas, you know, if you wanted to get out early, like a lot of people do, you actually have to comp back the state for your schooling. So I think that would be a fantastic thing to do. I'm not into a big state. I don't want there to be a huge overbearing state. So maybe a hybrid of that system and the canton system, from Prussian history, where at the county level, there is a militia that you turn 18, you sign up at the county level, you're enlisted in this group, you get some military training, but you also get some job training. Your iOS or MOS rather. Your MOS comes in, and you get that advanced individual training that that helps you in the real world, because then you get out and you stay as a reservist until you're 30, kind of like the Swiss system. So what I would like to see is a hybrid of all these things, where at the county level there is a military that has responsibility to the sheriff, the sheriff of the county, or if you want to elect a new position as a marshal or what have you, who's in charge of maintaining this thing and keeping it running well. But I think keeping it local is very important to having responsibility to the local community. Whereas, if you're just sticking your people in the army and sending them off, the who knows what the military is doing, um, you know, 2 star systems away when your son's on a freighter killing space bugs. It's like there's very little home front responsibility. Um, you could be doing who knows what out there, and you have a similar system in the real world where you join the army and they put you on a cargo plane and they ship you over to Iraq, and you get off the plane and you're patrolling your little desert you know trail. um, that has very little to do with what's going on in the heartland of Iowa, where people are
Yeah.
shucking and selling corn. So um, I don't think that a conscription system is bad. I
Okay.
kind of like it, but it needs to be well managed. It needs to be managed at the local level, because otherwise what you're going to end up with is, well, what we have today, which is an overbearing state and a military that just exists to go beat up people in the third world.
So let me give uh, positives for conscription, because
Hmm.
I think people already inherently know the negatives, right? Like if you hear the
Hmm.
words conscription, you're going to say,
Yeah, it's like
well,
I don't want to.
I don't want to. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
the big
yeah.
one. Yeah. Um, so the negatives I'll leave to the listeners, but the positives is there is a true brotherhood that comes out of that time in the military. The guys that you're with during that time are just I mean, they're people you never forget. You stay in touch with a lot of them. Uh, if you've read my books here, the the character Frank Wagner is just named after two of my battle buddies. It was Scott Furk,
Hmm.
Sloan Wagner, were two guys that I was with, who I was just really good friends with. So that's where that name comes from. I mean, it's a big deal, that kind of brotherhood. Like, you get really, really close with people. In the Marines, which I was not in, but they call it the spirit of the corps. They have like there's I want to say a Latin phrase that is translates to
Esprit
that.
de corps.
Spirit corps. Yeah, I didn't want to get that wrong, but it's
Yeah.
the spirit
Oh,
of the
I,
corps.
I
Like,
may have gotten it wrong, but that's
no, I think that
essentially
is
what it
it.
is.
Yeah,
Yeah. Hmm.
but there is that kind of closeness, and
Hmm.
that kind of brotherhood makes people better citizens.
Hmm.
I think that
The
they're
reason that it comes up too is because it makes you a better soldier, and a
yeah,
lot of the virtues that make one a better soldier also make them a better citizen. You
yeah.
know, Aristotle talks about military service, not necessarily within the terms that we're speaking of, but he talks about how the virtues of a soldier are very alike to the virtues of a citizen. So spirit of
Yeah,
camaraderie is spirit de corps. Yeah. Hmm.
so there's that. There's also historically the example of Sparta, where you have
Hmm.
this tiny little nation that just had so many soldiers, just regular people that were just
Hmm.
ready to go out and kill, that they were able to fight off big, much
Yeah,
bigger
the
numbers.
Persian
That,
Empire, which was
yeah,
huge and vast
huge
and
compared to
powerful.
them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the world superpower at the time. Hmm.
they also got to bully. Um, oh my goodness, I'm totally blanking on that.
It's late
The
in the night.
the Peloponnesian Wars at Athens.
Yeah.
Um, they got to
Well,
bully
they kicked the
Athens.
Athenians more than once, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so I mean, it's there's something to be said of that. You even see that. What was the World War II guys that came back, and then they we were talking about it last week.
Yeah,
These
the
guys
Battle
came
of
back from World War
Athens.
II. Yeah,
Hmm.
well, there you go.
Hmm.
I can't think of anything Athenian right now. But yeah, you have these citizens. They
Athens,
come
Georgia.
back. Yeah, they come back, and I mean, you could look at the history of rifle popularity in the United States
Hmm.
is fascinating. I'm sure there's a book, somebody has already done this, but that would make a great book to just show the
Yeah.
relationship between this is the popular rifle of this war, and
Hmm.
then this is what people bought when they came home. That's
Hmm.
exactly what I did. For all the talk, I know that ARs don't have 3-round burst. Nobody ever used 3-round burst with their M4 anyways.
Hmm.
So that's silly. But the reason that I went as soon as I got to Texas, I was like, I'm going to buy an AR because I can take it apart, blindfolded,
Hmm.
put it back together. I know uh,
I
every
know
nook and
every nook and
cranny of that.
cranny. Yep.
Yeah, I know exactly what I'm doing with it. I know how to use even the iron sights on it. I know this one rifle, and so that's why that's such a popular rifle. You have all these people from the military. They come home,
Who've
and that's
trained
what
with
they
it.
know. Yeah, they've
Yeah.
trained with it,
Yeah.
and it's what they know.
And
I didn't know anything about guns when I joined the army. I knew
mhm.
I knew which side was the dangerous end, and I knew what made it go boom boom. That's what I knew about
Yeah, you knew
guns.
that if you pull a trigger, it'll go pop. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, you have an example of that in scripture, actually. When David is going to go fight Goliath, and Saul puts armor on him, and then he says to Saul, I can't wear this because I haven't proved it. And different translations take that different directions, but I think essentially what's going on is he's saying, look, uh, I have not trained with this armor and armory. I'm not going to wear it because I'm not competent in this role.
Mhm.
So what does he
Well,
go
yeah,
to
and
him with? He goes to him with a staff and a sling,
yeah,
which is what he's competent with. And so
right.
people can be like, oh, the AR, it's such an underpowered cartridge or this, that, and the other. It's like, well, yeah, but it's what I know.
Yeah.
Nobody looked at David going at Goliath with a sling and thought, man, that's high power artillery right there. He's definitely going to win. But you gotta go with what you train with. And that's another reason that I think this is really valuable is if you have every single young man in your country knows how to clean, to fire competently an AR-15, it's going to be very hard to invade a country where there's an AR-15 behind every blade of grass.
Yeah, there's the picture of the kid from like the 50s in just like an elementary school classroom, and
Hmm.
he's like sitting there like charging a shotgun or something like that. You might be able to pull it up, but they used to just be able to show that in school. Like
Hmm.
here's a gun. Here's how you use a gun in school. I think that marksmanship should be part of high school. Now, there's obviously demographic reasons that has changed in America, but um, I mean
Yeah.
there's that. But I mean, it ideally we'd be teaching kids how to shoot in high school.
Yeah, that's not a
There
great.
it is. That's the exact one I was thinking of. Yeah,
Yeah,
the kid just.
there's actually several of these.
Oh, that's
Um,
not it. That's what is it? A bolt action? I can't really see it all that well.
I think it's a shotgun. No,
Ah, maybe
that one does look like a bolt action.
it looks like
This
he's
one's
pulling a bolt
definitely a
back.
shotgun.
Yeah, I've never seen that one. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Oh
Um,
man,
it might just be the way that
great.
I'm accessing these, but the quality on these photos is not great. But
What? It's like a
that's so
different
cool.
world, man.
That you can see that's a cop. He's got
Yeah,
a pistol there. Whereas these ones here, these kids were just learning it in common everyday classroom, no cops involved.
yeah,
Yeah, but I think the cool part about this one is just the look on that kid's face.
yeah,
That's just awesome. But it's like, if you have an entire generation of these kids who who grow up around the firearm, who know how to treat it with respect, you end up with young men looking like this.
there you go.
This here is that's a classroom. That's a shooting course.
Hmm.
So yeah. That said, though, the pros of it are there is a camaraderie, but there's also a kind of a self-respect and a respect for your fellow man that I think is seriously lacking in our uh, world today. And I think going to a military school does help with that. It's not a cure-all, but being fit, being forced to be fit, being forced to eat healthy food, being forced to wake up and make your bed in the morning, um, would do great things for our society, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for uh, conscription. I think
Hmm.
that I think that a lot of good comes from it. I think that it would weed out a lot of the weak aspects of the third world that want to come here and just kind of live off the dole.
Hmm.
And they're like, well, I don't want to join the military. I mean, I don't want to actually do anything for all
Hmm.
these benefits I'm here to receive. I just want to
Yeah.
receive them, and so they just don't show. I mean, there's a lot of good reasons for it. Most the biggest one just being the brotherhood aspect that you're putting
Hmm.
some skin in the game. Now that doesn't necessarily mean everyone has to do a deployment, uh, but I mean maybe a perfect example would be that everyone should do a round at the border. Everyone should be border patrol for a bit,
Hmm. Hmm.
and that should be part of the like National Guard type service or something like that, and that's your duty.
Yeah. So in South Africa, um, there was let's see, what was the name of this war? It's border between Angola and Southwest Africa, formed by the Cunene River. Um, just from what I'm looking it up, that might be not quite right. But the river and the cut line, there was a war between Angola and South Africa. And during that time, the South Africans conscripted all of their young men to go fight in this war that was a border dispute between South Africa and Angola. Now, from what I understand, it didn't ever turn into like a full hot war where like they were launching long range uh, rockets at each other or anything like that. Mostly a borderline dispute. But that's actually how we ended up with Elon Musk because he didn't want to go fight in that war, so he went over to Canada and became a college student over there. Most of these countries actually have exceptions, like in Sweden, or not Sweden, Switzerland. If you go overseas to go to college, you will not be required to return home for service. But when you do return home, you will have to fulfill your service unless you have uh, gone beyond the age where you have to, which I think is that same 30 years old.
I would also like to speak to politicians. I mean, as it
Hmm.
is, we have a republican form of government, and we have not had a president with military backgrounds since. Well, we have a current vice president. We'll
Hmm.
say that.
Well, I
But
mean,
actual
Bush.
military, yeah. George W. Bush had
Hmm.
some National Guard service. His father, what was he, like a World War II pilot or something crazy like that? Like he was
I
in,
don't remember if it was World War II, but yeah, he was some sort of military pilot.
yeah. So I mean, it's been a little bit since, because I mean his W's military service and like National Guard was like after Vietnam. Like
Hmm.
it was like nothing. He didn't really. He wasn't like in a war or nothing like that.
Hmm.
Which I I think for some countries, like okay, like there's not just a war every year, but in America there is a war every year, and
Yeah,
so if you weren't in that war, um,
something was going on.
yeah, you skipped out or you did something.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
yeah, George H.W. Bush was one of the youngest pilots in the Navy during World War II. So he got in June 9th, 1943.
Dang.
So he was a naval aviator.
But yeah, it would just
Hmm.
I mean, that I would love to see JD Vance be president just for that one reason. I mean, there's a lot of good
Yeah,
reasons, but um
yeah, I like J.D. Vance. I mean, I know he's got a lot of close ties to Palantir, and a lot of that is really suspect. But you know, well, it's a hard thing to determine with politicians. He says all the right things, but don't they all?
no, they don't all say all the right things. I think that's a big gold
That's,
star for
that is
JD Vance.
that is
Like,
a big improvement. Is the fact that
yeah,
he cares about his people and his place.
yeah.
Hmm.
Even if he doesn't, he does say the right things, which is the big
Hmm.
improvement. You could say
Hmm.
all of them don't actually care, but at least
Hmm.
he sounds like it.
Hmm.
But yeah, there is something to the idea of just being uh, ruled or led, or however you cope with the idea of your politicians that you voted for having power. But them being military, to me, it goes a long way, and I would like to see and so this is why Starship Troopers is so controversial with liberals, is because apparently it was like liberals that made at least the movie aspect of it, but conservatives saw this and they're like, yeah, we want this. This is what we want out of
Hmm.
life, is this kind of world. And they were like, oh, you guys don't understand that it's satire. It's like, well, we don't care. You made us look cool, so
Yeah,
we're gonna go with it. You can't just like make us look cool and then say, oh, well, I was only kidding.
yeah. It's like too late.
Yeah, we're still gonna go with it.
Yeah,
So
too late. We love it.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, that is not the system we live under now. Kind of rehashing something from last week. But I think it would be a vast improvement. Hopefully, in the UK, I kind of hope they do go the conscription route for two main reasons. One is because I think it would be good for the youth of England. Right now, unemployment is very high. I think it would be good, especially if they followed kind of the Irish model of you learn a trade while you're in, and then when you get out, you immediately have work experience in some field or other. Um, Also, I think it would do a lot to persuade a lot of the foreign invaders to abscond. Right now, the UK is also looking at making halal slaughter illegal because it is a very inhumane way to slaughter large animals, anyway. And if they did that, the Muslim communities are threatening. If you do that, we're going to leave.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Yeah, don't threaten me with a good time, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah, take your
we
kids with you.
yeah, we didn't ask for you to come here anyway.
Yeah.
So
In fact, we asked for you to not come here.
yeah,
Like,
every time the English people, well, the people of the UK speaking more broadly, every time they've been asked about the migrant situation, they have always voted to have it decrease, to have them sent home. But they don't want it to come to a vote because they know that, and so this has been foisted upon them without their consent.
Do you remember the clip of the African guy who was in Ukraine? Like, he was a refugee from Africa, but he went to Ukraine, and they were interviewing him, and he's like, "We're not going to fight for Ukraine. We're not Ukrainian." And that right there, that mask off moment, that is why I like the idea of conscription, because once you have to actually put some skin in the game, you can very easily separate the wheat from the chaff as far as who actually belongs to this place, who actually has a heritage here.
Yeah, it's funny. There was a picture that I saw also of a sheriff in Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, who was welcoming refugees from the Ukraine when that happened. And he says the clip, he has it. How can we fight?
Ooh,
How
do we
can
have a
fight?
link? Do we have a link?
I don't know if it'll let you put links in the chat, but I bet.
Copy paste. If you do, I would love to play that, because that to me just says it all. I don't know.
While we're well, this is turning out to be a little bit harder than I expected.
Let's see if I can find it. Let's see. How?
Maybe if I switch these words around. Yeah, I'm not finding it. But it was a good point that he was made. He's like, how can we fight in this war? We're not even from here.
Yeah.
And,
which is, it's, first of all, that's like a silly. That is a silly way of thinking. Like, how could I fight in this war if I'm not from here? Well, you pick up the gun and you shoot. That's
yeah. It's like, let me introduce you. Here's a rifle. Walk that way. If you don't, you'll get shot.
If they,
it's in the FFG telegram. Oh, okay.
If they were the caliber of men who would actually pick up a gun and defend their land, they wouldn't be refugees in the first place. So that's really what it all comes down to. They left their ancestral homeland so that they could live off of us. And of course they're not going to defend our land because they have no stock in it, and they're the kind of people that run from a fight like that. So yeah, that's why would we expect anything else?
Let's see. I'll try this real quick. Hopefully this isn't dragging on for y'all too long. But all right, let me full screen this.
Oh, you got it.
And then let me go in here and screen share. Now I have not tried to screen share this before, but let's see. Oh, it doesn't want to let me do that. It doesn't want to let me share my Windows Media Player. I do entire screen. Let's try this. All right, I share my entire screen. Whoa! And here we go.
There it is. I see it. Yeah. Do you have sound on your end?
I do. Are you not hearing it?
I'm not hearing it.
Okay, let me try something real quick. Also share audio. Hey, it works better if you click the button that says share audio.
There you go.
All right.
They told us, like, we are going to give you guns and you're going to fight for Ukraine. I said, hi. We're going to fight for Ukraine? We are not Ukrainian. We are black. So how can we fight? How can we fight for Ukraine? Ukraine.
I like how I had forgotten that's the way that he worded it too.
Yeah.
That's so
How
much
can
better.
we fight for Ukraine? We are black. We are not Ukrainian. It's like
Yeah.
took the words right out of my
Yeah.
mouth, my guy.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah,
That's
you're
hilarious.
but it was there was a funny picture I saw, getting back to what I was saying before, of a fellow who uh so he was a sheriff in the Republic of Ireland, and he was welcoming Ukrainian refugees. And he's got like this startled look on his face, and he's in front of this family, and it's like Congolese
Yeah.
Africans, and they're
Yeah.
refugees from Ukraine. It's like,
Yeah.
no, these
Mhm.
people are not refugees from Ukraine. They are economic migrants. They went to Ukraine.
Yep.
That didn't pan out, so they went to a different country that was
Yep.
probably not at war at the time, Ireland. It's like
Yeah.
they're not refugees. They're here to steal stuff. They're here to leech off your system.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I think that would be extremely good. A good side effect of this, if we could make halal butchery illegal, if we enact conscription, you have to fight in our army for your people, for your nation, for your place, for your soil. Put some blood in your soil. Yeah, I think that would be a good thing.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and scroll through the chat real quick, which we do at the end of every show, and then we'll go ahead and hang it up. Thad says, live stream, remote control. Hello, Thad. If you're okay with me calling you Thad, sorry. Thaddeus McFaddeus. Making things worse. All right. Dickie says, nobody asked why. Yeah, look, Dickie, you got to give more context, because when we scroll through these at the end, it's pronounced Nicomachean. Yeah, Nicomachean. That's right. Super random, correct. Modern and
was good.
postmodern veered somewhat from Aristotle. A current movement is coming back towards Aristotelian philosophy. Yeah, I think that is true. Postmodern thinking did veer away from Aristotle, his concept of the forms. A lot of that foundational thinking got abandoned by the postmodern. But it's not because postmodernism is necessarily a rational rejection of Aristotelianism, as much as it is just postmodernism is a rejection of rationality per se. So yeah, the reaction to that is we are coming back to it, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, but you've noticed that a lot of the mid-Eva to big Eva guys are playing the I hate Aristotle game, and saying like, oh well, I mean their idea of that is as silly as me saying like, well, Jesus is more important than Cornelius Van Til. Well, of course they would agree with that.
Yeah. I mean,
So
I don't think you could find a single Christian who would disagree with that statement, because I mean, it's kind of one of those no true Scotsman's tests, where it's like, well, if you say that somebody is more important than Jesus Christ, you are not a Christian. That is kind of definitive.
yeah.
And none of the people who claim the name of Christ, I think, would ever make such a silly statement.
Let me talk. I want to talk about this one because I remember when that was said.
Okay.
This was in reference to the Aristotle virtue ethics thing, where he said, "Just make a stupid mistake that ruins your life. Well, he said it ruins your life.
I imagine he means ruins.
Yeah. So he's talking about like you do something that ruins your life permanently, right? My response to that is this to me is the ultimate proof that virtue ethics is the true ethical system. Is if somebody says, I'm not the kind of person who would do X, but they have done X, they are that kind of person, right? Because they are by definition that kind of person. Whether or not they are still that person, they are still that kind of person.
Gotcha.
At some level. So there are it's like the old joke. I've heard different versions of it where it's like I I built this great fence around my house, but nobody calls me John the fence builder. And
Yeah,
you know, I
yeah.
put this great roof on my house, and
Uh-huh.
nobody calls me John the roofer. But you know, you do it with one goat, and
Yeah, yeah, and everybody calls you.
yeah,
Yep,
calls you
yep.
that. So that there is a such thing as
It's
things
Norm
that.
Macdonald, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, I'm sure it goes further back than that.
Yeah,
But there's there is a such thing as things that change you
yeah. There
on a
are
permanent
defining
level.
moments. Yeah,
Yeah,
certainly.
and that was a lot of what Thello was about here.
Mm-hmm.
Was
Mm-hmm.
just the things that you do, whether or not they have a negative or positive effect on others, they always have an
They
effect on
define
you.
you. Yeah.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
your
Mm-hmm.
past does define you, and if you
Mm-hmm.
overcome it in some way, well, that's also a part that defines you.
Yeah.
So, my I'll use the example of my father. He's very open about this. He's always said is that he is a drug addict. He doesn't do drugs anymore. He actually just hit 30 years of sobriety. But
Fantastic.
he, yeah, we got him a cool coin and all that. So,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but he's very open with it. He always says, I want to be open about that. So that defines who he is. But
Mm-hmm.
what also defines who he is those 30 years of sobriety.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Mm-hmm.
not that the 30 years erase the other years before that. It's that
Yeah.
those two things now compound to make who he is now.
Yeah. It's both and, not either or. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good point. So he says, not a tax. You should have to find a replacement. This is talking about when we were talking about conscription.
Israel. Yeah.
Israel. You have to pay a tax. Um, the thing about finding a replacement is, yeah, that's a very funny, nice theory. But the thing is, if everybody else is getting conscripted, where are you getting a replacement from? And the answer is you're not. Uh,
Yeah,
in
that didn't make
Israel,
sense to
you
me.
do pay a tax if you don't want to be conscripted. That is a thing that you do. Um,
He had made a comment about
talking about the
ooh,
NATO. NATO was to protect against the USSR. Yeah, that is correct. When I was
yeah.
scrambling and my brain was trying to say Eastern European Russian, I was looking for USSR, but I was thinking of too many things at the same time.
Let's talk about this because this is a common thing people say. The soldier doesn't fight for liberty and freedom; he fights for the man next to him. I think that this is talking about two separate things.
Hmm.
So my reason for joining the army is going to be different from my reason why in the moment I'm doing things that I'm doing.
Yeah,
Uh,
your
so my
immediate
reason,
your immediate motives are not the same as your long-term motives.
right? So
Hmm.
yeah, as I'm in Afghanistan or wherever it is and whatever trench you're in that moment, yeah, you're fighting because you want to keep yourself and this guy next to you who you've, like I said, there's that brotherhood
Hmm. Hmm.
where now you're willing to jump on a grenade for this guy that you didn't even know last year.
Hmm.
Um, that yeah, in the moment there's that, but uh, I was not one of those people that joined the army for high ideals.
Hmm.
I was not like, oh man, I'm fighting for truth, justice, in the American way, right?
Hmm.
Um, I joined the army to honestly kind of run away from a lot of things that were going on at home at the time. And I mean, that's
Hmm.
what a lot of the guys you talk to these guys in basic training, and they're like, I was going to go to prison if I didn't join the army. Like
Yeah.
it's never like this, like all American
Hmm.
ideal thing. It's like,
Yeah.
I got
Friday
this girl
afternoon, we
pregnant,
were
bro.
sitting around grilling hot dogs with my dad, and my dad said, "You should join the army." Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like that. I'm sure that does happen, but it's certainly a minority. But
Yeah.
I think, if you have conscription going for the entire population, that is a good outcome that you are going to see, where you know people who do have things to run away from, instead of having to seek it out, it seeks out and finds them, and kind of helps pull them out of that. But I have a feeling that Z right here, when he says, they're almost there, civic nationalists are almost right. Yeah, because The soldier doesn't fight for liberty and freedom. He fights for his people.
Yeah.
That's
That's
what
why I think
he really fights for.
a better quote in that vein is he doesn't fight because he hates what's in front of him. It's because he loves what's behind him.
Hmm. Yeah,
I think that's a better way
Lewis,
of
I think,
thinking.
he says,
Yeah.
I do not love the sword for its gleam or its sharpness, but I love it because of what it defends.
Yeah.
Hmm.
What exactly is going on with this comment about the
So,
Roman?
talking about, in Starship Troopers, in order to vote, you had to be a soldier. And I believe he's referring to the Roman model of franchise, which I'm not super familiar with
Yeah.
which part of Roman history he's talking about, because their franchise did change quite a bit over the years. It may be the case that at one point you did have to be in the army to vote. I don't remember that from my history lessons, but I am not a Rome scholar. I've played Rome Total War, but that's not my area of expertise.
I like this comment. This is kind of an inside joke. I have to do my part as a friend of the show. He's got his full name out there this time.
There you go.
Yeah, this is one of my best friends. So I've known him for
Fantastic.
forever. He's known me since before the army. I've known him since 4th grade.
Hmm.
So.
All right. Well, it looks like that's it for the comments. Did I miss any
Oh,
that were
I
crucial?
see quite a bit that just came in.
Oh, wait. Oh, yeah.
Dickie's saying
What's
something
this?
that. Well, let's go ahead and pin this comment. Something that ruins life permanently is joining the army. That's what we were talking about. I do like where you went from the comment, though. Yeah, I mean, it can ruin things. I mean, I have knee problems and back problems to this day.
Hmm.
I am rated for PTSD. I mean, there's different things that I don't like about my time in the army, but then there's good things that came out of it. So I mean, it can ruin your life for sure. I mean,
Everything's a trade-off. Everything's a
yeah,
trade-off. Yeah. Only soldiers who owned land could vote in the Republic until the Marian reforms. Uh, okay. Uh, Sounds good. I mean, if only soldiers who owned land could vote in the United States, it'd be a very different country. For one thing, I wouldn't be able to vote. I own
yeah.
land, but I do not. But I am not a soldier.
I like
One would be able to vote.
this is true. The high-minded idealism causing one to join the army is so rare that nobody believes when someone actually does it. I don't know that I know anyone who actually did it. I know a lot of people who joined right out of high school,
Hmm.
and I don't think that even when they said that that's why they joined, that was really the reason that they joined.
Hmm.
Um, I think a lot of people joined the army because they didn't want to grow up, and they knew that, well, I'm out of high school. I don't want to, go get a
Hmm.
mortgage and whatever. I'm just
Hmm.
gonna,
Let me
I don't
think
care.
around in
I don't
someone
care if I
else's
get.
house for a little bit longer.
Yeah, there is I mean, the barracks, man, dude, like all these, the barracks is such a wild place because it's all, first of all, it's all single soldiers because the married
Hmm.
soldiers are in
And married
married
housing, yeah.
housing.
Hmm.
Yeah, so you've got like the most high testosterone men that you can have, like
With
in
no
co-ed,
outlet.
yeah, co-ed barracks, all
Mm.
like right next to each other. It
Hmm.
was a mess, dude.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
I do suggest, if you're trying to hold on to your Christian morals, that you join the U.S. Army. It's not the easiest gauntlet to get through.
No, it's not. And the co-ed barracks doesn't help with that. All right. Well, it looks like. Oh, Richard, or Dickie rather, saying this is my real name. He says the high-minded idealizing. Uh, Going off of that, he said everyone kept telling me I was a liar. It was maddening. Yeah. So evidently he joined the military out of high-minded idealism. Mind you, after I tried to talk him out of it, I know this guy personally. He's a friend of mine as well. Yeah, when you're a small show like this, just getting started, and the production quality is this, you know,
Yeah.
only friends of the show watch the show. So
I will say one guy that I definitely believed his story was a Marine that I met in MEPS. So I was getting fingerprinted at the time, like highly detailed fingerprint of every single finger and all that. And I went to sit with this guy, and we got to talking, and I said something about, oh yeah, I joined so I could get college money and whatever, right? And he says, oh, I joined the Marines so I can kick some ass. I
I believe you.
that guy. I believe you. I believe that you woke up and you said, I'm gonna do it. Let's do it. Like, yeah. So I trust that guy. I don't consider that high-minded idealism, but I do very much trust that man was telling the truth. Yeah, I'm doing my part. Exactly.
Yeah, I'm doing my part. My part. Yeah. The only reason I ever showed up to barracks was for change of quarters. It was like chasing toddlers.
No.
Yeah.
Charge of quarters. Yeah, he's talking about CQ
Change of
is
quarters.
charge of quarters.
Oh, it is charge of quarters.
Yeah,
okay.
that's CQ is when you're like he said, chasing toddlers. Like you're making sure that the drunks stay inside, and nobody gets beat up or anything like that.
Making sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. Well, we had a 2-hour show. Thanks for the folks who stopped by. Thanks for the comments. It did make things more interesting. Because we do round up comments at the end of the show, do try and give a little more context so that we can kind of, in our mind, we can get back to the place where we were so that we know what we were talking about when you said, ha ha, lol, because that doesn't give us much context.
One last thing.
We just got done talking about me putting down my dog. Thanks.
So next week, if all goes well, we are going to have another guest, and it is a gentleman who is an expert and a published author on the JFK assassination. So with all the documents dropping recently, he's got a lot to say about it, and I'm very curious. This guy is just very, very, very passionate about this topic. So I'm very interested to hear what he has to say. He is a member of the SCV at my local camp, so he's someone that I very much appreciate, and hoping we have him on next week to talk about the JFK assassination.
Well, I mean, I've got my own theories about the JFK assassination.
His theories are wild. I'm telling you right now. Really? No, it's not Roger Stone.
It was not Roger Stone.
His theory, I feel like I'm gonna constantly have to say, like, have you verified this? Because his theories are off the wall, but he has published them. He claims that he is the originator of the connections between the Lincoln assassination and the JFK assassination. Like the name of the car was a Lincoln, and that it was at like Ford Theater, but like there was a Ford vehicle involved. Like he says he's the guy that made that up. So, or made that connection. So
does he see that as a serious connection, or was he just kind of trolling?
I don't know. He's no respecter of Abraham Lincoln, so I don't.
Well, that's excellent. I can appreciate him for that.
Yeah.
But okay. Well, we'll have to see.
Hopefully that works out.
We'll try and set that up for next week. It'll be a very interesting show, I'm sure. I mean, I'm not a boomer, so I'm not, completely wrapped around the axle about JFK, but I do think it was a defining moment for our nation, and so I think it's important because of that. And I do think it does have an effect, the fact that somebody somewhere was powerful enough to take out the president of the United States, and that group of people or that person, the ramifications of that are affecting our politics today. So, all right. Well, thank you to everybody who has come along and stuck out to the end of the show. It's been a long show. We typically shoot for about an hour and a half, and we went all the way past 2 hours. So We appreciate everybody who stuck around. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your holy day and get some sleep because it's work day tomorrow. Anyway, take care.